Hello and welcome back to the channel. Amber here, and today I'm joined by Laura talking about episode 2, House of the Dragon, Rhaenyra the Cruel. So how are you feeling about this one?
About this episode in general, it was all right.
I think that's
It was just fine.
that's kind of mirroring my thoughts as well. I liked the first episode a lot more.
Me too. Me too.
And I actually liked the first episode of this season more than any of the episodes of last season.
Also agreed.
Yeah, I think after sitting on it for a couple hours, I want to say that I don't think this one was bad, but after spending some time outside of King's Landing and outside of Dragonstone, we had this nice time at the wall, and we're hanging out with the Hulls, and we had all of these kind of like meet and greets with the king, and we're meeting new people, and now I feel like I'm getting like claustrophobic again, hanging out with many of the same characters who keep doing the same things repeatedly. Like no one can control themselves, everyone's dysfunctional.
I would say my biggest complaint is all of the bitter men. We've got one bitter man after another in this episode. We've got Daemon being bitter that because his ego can't manage about not being the heir. We've got Criston Cole, forever and always the most bitter man in the series, like still just obsessively running his mouth about Rhaenyra. And now he's hand to the king.
We've got Otto bitter that people are. I mean, he's been setting this up his entire life, and now he's like shocked Pikachu face when like everything falls apart like it does.
Like he didn't know these people ahead of time.
Right. Right. It's so messy. And I do love a mess from time to time. But I think what hindered a little bit of this episode for me is some of the most interesting aspects of it were just slight moments of characterization. Like there's the moment when Rhaenyra is at like her small council meeting, and she's just informed that someone has killed Jaehaerys. And she's like, I would never do this. I would never do this. And her own council members don't really seem to understand that she's telling the truth at first. And then it cuts to Daemon, and she's still talking, and then like from behind Rhaenys shoulder, you get this point of view of Rhaenys looking at Daemon like, oh, Rhaenys knew it was Daemon before anyone in that room. And Rhaenyra's still talking, but we don't get to see like any conversation between these two women that I think would have been really interesting and dynamic in this situation, but instead we get Rhaenyra and Daemon, I don't know.
Fighting again.
Again, yes.
You know, it was interesting to me that Rhaenyra was shocked that Daemon did this. I'm not sure how you could know this man for any, decent length of time, especially like your whole life, and be shocked that he would do something, especially with that smug little look he had on his face while she was talking about it. You could just see it in his face. He was like,
he was so pleased with himself.
I did a good job here. I did a good job.
Yeah, so pleased with himself. I can't believe I'm going to say this right now, but Daemon's blood and cheese hiring mishap, it was really dumb. But Criston Cole's reaction, I'm like, you know what? That's actually like, it was still dumb. Like you're sending this guy to his death, but it was still a better plan than what Daemon had come up with.
I don't know if I agree there.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you, the more terrible things that Daemon does, the more I appreciate that he's just a terrible dude doing terrible things.
Sure.
Like, in the way he never feels any remorse for anything. It's just like, okay, we've got a very messy man on our hands here, but nobody that's around him seems to want to take like any genuine accountability for how out of hand he gets regularly. But they just keep letting him stick around. Rhaenyra never really does anything to curb his behavior, except like maybe have an argument with him. But what does that really do?
Yeah, we saw Viserys try and send him back to the Vale where it's like, you need to leave, go to your wife. How does that end? He ends up going to Dragonstone with Missaria and being like, I'm gonna marry her now. Like,
Yeah.
he does whatever. Damon does whatever Damon wants. And that is, I agree, it is entertaining.
Criston Cole's idea to send Arryk, it's Arryk and Arryk, right?
Yeah.
Okay, his idea to send Arryk was like sneaky and definitely could have worked, but I think it would have needed far more planning than it had. And Criston Cole's like constant acting on his extremist and wholly mentally unwell perspectives is never going to be a win for me.
No,
I want that dude to exit stage left forever.
I can't wait. I can't wait for him
I
to
hope he
die.
gets like I hope his punishment is in true Targaryen tradition where he is burned and then eaten by a dragon.
I'm kind of hoping it's like a really lame death. Like he trips and hits his head on a rock, and everyone's like, oh, the great and magnificent Criston Cole out with a whimper.
Look, girl, I have a feeling that I'm going to hate him a lot more in the next coming episodes because he seems way too bold with his play pretend hand of the king. Because I think we can both
Oh, God. It's going to be insufferable.
visualize Otto Hightower is not going to take this. He is not just going to scurry back to Old Town with his tail between his legs and let this go. He's going to handle Criston Cole, I think.
I know what happens to Otto in the books, and where they've taken it in the show makes it seem like they're going to go in a very different direction. So I hope you're right. At this point, I'm almost like, I hated Otto for so long, but then watching him like roll his eyes at these idiots where he's like, but wait, there's more. And he calls it a prank. Like,
Like, what do you mean a prank? I really dislike Otto Hightower, but when you look at him amongst the buffet of very unlikable men on this show, like, I like everybody better than Criston Cole. Like, literally everyone, even Aegon. Like, and he is he's about as insufferable as his mother is.
Oh, yeah.
His only saving grace is that he's a teenager, and so, like, I expect brash and rowdy behavior.
So who's your most insufferable? Your top 3.
Criston Cole is number 1.
Okay.
Alicent is number 2. And I would say Aegon is number 3. I kind of hope they all get killed together.
You know what it is for me? And maybe this is just, I'm American, grew up in the Midwest. You meet people like this. It's the type of people who hide and cloak their awfulness and their nastiness behind a veneer of piety, where it's like, you know Criston Cole, he's a bad dude. You see Alicent, she goes up to Aegon, and instead of comforting her son who is weeping over the loss of his dead child, she goes to have sex with Criston Cole instead. And even like Helena, she doesn't comfort Helena. She's like, nope, get on the back of this wagon. We've got things to do. Like there was no time for there. It's just Alicent, she wants to believe so badly that she's a good person or she wants to be a good person, I think, but she just makes the most epic of failed choices that she should know better, considering Otto did the same thing to her. So I really don't have any sympathy for her whatsoever.
None. No, not at all. I have zero sympathy for her. I can't suffer a fool, and she is a fool.
And then on top of that, like you have Rhaenyra, where it's like, I know there are people out there who can't, get out of like a really awful relationship, but Daemon will be what brings her down, as we're seeing. Everything that happens, it's just, you almost feel like she went into things thinking like he's going to be the protector, he's going to be the one that can like prop me up. And now in this episode, it's just like crumbling before her eyes. Like he's the one who's making everything worse.
He's a very homicidal man.
And he has no
Like, he
forethought.
really enjoys killing. He loves killing.
And that's the thing. For me, he would be much more interesting. I love a good villain. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy a great villain, but I don't like dumb villains. And everything he does is just like, bud, like just think a couple steps through. It's not that hard. Think about cause and effect. You know, like it's not that hard to have the slightest bit of common sense.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about consequences or what matters. I think that he cares about doing things that make him feel good. And he got quite a chuckle out of the mistaken like the old switcheroo of who they're going to kill. Like, he sends these two into the castle to look for Aemond, who is clearly not a child. And he's like, I mean, they made a mistake. I can't be held at fault for that, but ha ha ha. Like, at the same time. And he's like dead face telling Rhaenyra these things. Like, she's supposed to be like, oh, yeah, I totally get it. You were in the right. Don't worry. And then he's like, you know what? I don't like the way you're talking to me. I'm leaving for Harrenhal. Peace.
Well, if he just was a little bit more intelligent, like he would be such a great, entertaining, villainous character. Like just a little bit, like just a bit more. That's all I'm asking. And like I can't root for the idiot. I really can't. Like I lose
I'm not
sympathy.
rooting for him.
I know. But some people are. But some people are
rooting for him to do what? Kill more people? Because, like, I am rooting for him to come up with more insane schemes to enact without speaking to anybody and then deflecting blame when it doesn't go right. But, like, rooting for him to do what? What's he gonna? He's not. The man's not taking the throne.
No.
Like, he's got too many people to fight. No one is going to back him. And at some level, he's got to know that, like, the only reason anybody tolerates his bullshit is because of Rhaenyra.
That's true. That's true.
Like, because they have to.
I mean, this episode is just a smorgasbord of bad decisions. I mean,
I think it's a smorgasbord of terrible men. Why? I can't get over what a weirdo Criston Cole is. Like, that man has nothing but bad ideas and an obscene obsession with his exes. Like, and now he's like buddying up with a couple teenagers that are his like secret girlfriend's children.
That's so weird.
What are you doing, you weirdo? Like, oh, I can't stand him. I'm so glad he can't ride a dragon. He doesn't deserve such a majestic pet.
Oh my god, can you imagine? He would be insufferable.
You know who else is now officially a weirdo? Is Aemon. Like, when we cut to that brothel scene and that man is laying curled up in the fetal position in the madam's lap, because she's obviously the madam of that brothel, and he's got his weird mommy fantasy going on, I was like, sir, stop being weird. Like, what is it with you? The men, like the Criston Cole, Aegon, Aemon trio of men that are roughly, I don't know, like Criston Cole's relatively older than them, but like the three of them together is like the biggest group of weirdos in the show.
Can you imagine if they were transported into real life, current day, like, and you sent them to like high school? They would be the weird kids for sure. They would be the weirdest of the weird kids. Like, the hills have eyes. Like, where were you born? Under like a trap door in a cellar? Like, never to meet anyone in the real world? Oh, they're a mess. They're a mess. And then we've got Aegon, King Aegon, just executing all of the rat catchers. For what? Helena has seen the guy. She knows what he looks like. All he had to do was bring her out front and be like, point to the one. But no, instead, he's going to kill every rat catcher in the city. I hope this season ends with, like a rabies outbreak in King's Landing.
I at that scene, I guess I was like, he's a teenager, and it's not like we haven't seen royals in this universe go way overboard before. But it also would be hard to be like a teen who's just become a monarch, and then like one of your children are murdered, especially like, with the importance on male heirs in this universe. Like, at some level, I could see killing all the rat catchers if Helena hadn't, served as an in-person witness.
Right.
But that dude just does whatever whim comes to mind. Laris is all the way in his head, which you can really see play out with his argument with Otto, where he's like, "You're fired, old man. You're my dad's hand, not mine. Like, I'm not trying to be weak and this and that." And like, you can see Laris's little manipulation really bloom and unfurl in that moment where Aegon's like, "Go, get out." And then Otto runs to Alicent and he's like, "I have to go home." And then what was this? Why did they choose to drop Daron in like that?
I think they forgot.
Not a word.
They forgot.
Not a mention. We have spent, what is this now? 12 episodes from
12 hours.
The beginning of
12 hours.
12 hours of opportunity to bring Daron's name up. And now they're like, oh, BTW, she has a fourth child, a third son, and he's at Old Town.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean this is how you're introducing that? Why wasn't this introduced, I don't know, last season? Just even a couple lines of dialogue could have sewn this up in a much better way. And then they, of course, literally just drop it again right after he says that. They're like, done talking about that. Moving back on to Alicent trying to convince her father that everything's going to be okay by leaving her, Criston Cole, and Aegon in charge. Otto Hightower knows that's the worst idea ever.
Oh, man.
I don't blame him for being like, you know what? I'm going home. I'm going to worry about the one child of yours that has any chance of listening to reason.
Do you think when Larry's planted that little seed of mistrust into Aegon, that he in a million years could have predicted that Criston Cole would be the one who replaces Otto?
I feel like this was a folly on part of. I'll be honest with you. So far, Larys has proven to have he has good pattern recognition. He is capable of manipulation. He knows how to get into somebody's head. But I don't think he took it as far as he needed to. He should have already planted an idea of who the next hand should be. He left that door open and let Criston Cole walk through it, and I hope he regrets it.
Yeah.
Criston Cole is hand. What a terrible idea.
If we go to war, Criston Cole is going to be so is he replaced in the Kingsguard now? Because if we go to war, then somebody else has to protect the king while the hand is handing, or is he going to do both?
Girl, that is beyond me. I'm sure in his head he can do all the positions all at once, even though he's qualified only to just basically be a member of the Kingsguard. And really, I think he belongs on the team of, in A Song of Ice and Fire, what is the little army for the Seven?
Oh, the Faith of the Seven?
The Faith of the Seven. That's where Criston Cole belongs. He should be the Lord Commander of the Faith of the Seven.
Him and Alicent just need to run away and start their own cult together, honestly.
Yeah, that way they can just make their own rules as they see fit.
Exactly. I kind of want to cut back to a topic from last week because
there
were some people who are kind of upset how the whole blood and cheese thing acted out. And personally, I think it was fine. I don't think that the changes that they made to that event, like, and just this event in particular, made it any better or worse than it is in the books. Personally, I only saw it as a plot pushing event. I was never like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. It was just, it's nothing comparable to the Red Wedding. It's just, it is what it is. But people were hyping it up like, oh, it's going to be like the Red Wedding. I never saw it like that. But
How would it be like the Red Wedding?
I don't I don't know.
Like,
In terms of like gruesomeness, maybe like shock value.
maybe, but I don't think it could ever have the impact of the Red Wedding. It's just not of the correct scale.
Correct. And I think the problem with that is if they really wanted to feel more of an emotional connection and get like that more like gut reaction from people, we needed to spend more time with Helena to understand like her sorrow for that moment. Because up until now, she's barely spoken but a few words. And she doesn't even talk in complete sentences either. She's just firing off, prophecy
Like
and
small statements and
right. And I think that's really unfortunate because her character as a dreamer is so interesting. And it's kind of just like she's been like swept to the side so that we can focus on how horrible all of these men are. And like it almost feels like an accident, like in trying to kind of show that Alicent and Rhaenyra has the whole world against them and Rhaenys too because this isn't a world that's for women where women have, agency and they can do what they want. And the story is really about like the climb of these women or the fall of these women. And telling that story, they're focusing on like the reason for that happening, which is the men, while like failing horribly to explain, why someone like Helena, what she's feeling, what she's like, what are her thoughts, what are her motivations, who is she? Because right now she's just a dreamer, sister, wife of Aegon, mother Jaehaerys who was killed. Like we don't know really anything about her, and I find that tragic for the character because I love the character.
yeah, I think there's a handful of women that are characters in the show that have really hollow foundations to them. Helena is one of them. Massaria is another one. We keep seeing her, but like it's a very hollow character. She's may or may not be some sort of spy, and she saw Sir Arryk coming in, but we're not really sure if she went to say anything or not. And then we, just cut to that later scene of the
Oh, you're
twins.
so right. You're so right.
And like, this is actually my biggest complaint about the show is the speed that it moves at requires like cutting contextual information out of the show. So as I watch it, I'm just kind of like, I mean, okay, we're just going along. I'm just riding the wave. I don't expect anything like, I don't expect like the deep, serious foundation that shows like a Game of Thrones have, where you're really traveling around, you're getting to see everybody's motives, you're getting to see like things play out across different areas and how they all intertwine into one. And this show seems to want to model that, but without the actual depth of context.
You're right, because think about it. This happening to Helena in the last episode. So we've spent 11 hours. We don't really know Helena. The Red Wedding happens. We've spent 39 hours following around the Starks of Winterfell and like King Rob, like we knew that character. And so like when something really upsetting like that happens, that's just kind of shocking and so emotional, it's because we had that time to sit with the characters. And I just,
The emotional investments are so different from this show in a Game of Thrones for me.
yeah, I would be sad to see some characters go, but I wouldn't be gutted. When Ned Stark died, it was only 10 episodes, and I was still like, oh my
Girl,
God.
Don't talk to me about Daddy Ned dying in season 1. Like, what? That might have been the most shocking thing I'd ever seen on TV, because at that point it was so unexpected. Because when I watched season 1 of A Game of Thrones, I had not read A Song of Ice and Fire yet. And like that first time watching his head get lopped off, you're like, what is happening? How could they kill off a main character?
Right.
I mean, down the road, as you're exposed to the material multiple times, like I told you recently, like during this reread of A Song of Ice and Fire, I'm like, oh man, I can see how Ned got his head cut off. Like he walked right up into that.
Right.
But that first time, the emotional investment in the Starks, the way that we were so, like everybody was so invested in Ned and his honor and doing the right thing. And then they put him up on that podium in the Sept of Baelor, and Joffrey's like, Sir Ilyn, bring me his head. And it was the most chaotic thing I've ever seen in an opening season for a series. And that was the moment where I was like, I love this.
Right. And it works because of the emotional investment to the character.
Right. I haven't had that experience in this show.
Right.
I am highly emotionally invested in the dragons, though. None of them, I don't want to see another one get hurt.
True. Honestly, you know what? Talking about the dragons, I just need to get to the dragon seeds. I just need new writers for dragons. I'm kind of over our current cast. You know what? Bring in that dog, the dog of the rat catcher. Give him a dragon. That 10 out of 10.
What a comeback moment that would be for him.
His revenge.
Let him fight. Let him fight Daemon.
Like Air Bud. Oh.
You know what I thought about during this episode is, you know how Aemond has made it very clear that he believes he's the one who deserves to be the heir?
Right.
Out of him and his brother. He hasn't necessarily been like, I'm better than my older sister, but he has made it very clear that between him and Aegon, it should have been him. And I don't disagree with him, even though I don't necessarily think he has the right temperament for the throne. But now would be the time for Aemond to strike. He needs to get up out of that fetal position in the brothel, and he needs to take his ass back home and shank his brother. And that's how he takes the throne.
Man, that would make things so much more enjoyable.
So much better. It would be so much better to watch that diabolical asshole up on the throne versus his mentally unwell older brother.
You know what I noticed too about this episode that made it, a touch less likable for me? Last week we had some touches of tonal differences. And obviously this following that episode with the death of a child, you can't really have any haha moments. But just being at Winterfell and hanging out with Craig and Stark, and then even Aegon in that episode, he's on the throne with his buddies, cracking jokes. There doesn't seem to be enough of that, I feel like, where it just it's so much doom and gloom to the point where I'm like, am I going to be excited about anything again? Am I going to be happy about anything on this show again? Unless it's cheering at the demise and the death of a horrible person. Am I going to smile at all?
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
I want to.
It's a lot of shock value scenes stacked on top of one another, and so many of them carry tones of anguish and misery in them.
Right. And I don't tend to like shows like that. The Handmaid's Tale. I watched a couple seasons of that, but what's the point? I don't really consume media that just point blank makes me sad and depressed. I need a little a little tonal shift here and there.
Yeah.
And I mean,
yeah.
I think the one thing that I did enjoy on this episode, even though it was pretty gloomy, is circling back around to the point of view of the small folk. We had the madam at the brothel. We had the blacksmith Hugh and his sick child and his wife talking about the problems of being able to afford food. We had the hulls on Driftmark. We had, was there another one? Oh, Massaria talking about, like how she kind of like found her way in where she's at, like pretty much clawing from nothing to having like some type of establishment, but still, like she's not powerful, even though like she's in a better position. And I did
Yeah.
enjoy that aspect.
All of those scenes that you brought up just now,
Hmm.
I wish that they would have spent maybe a minute or two more
Yes.
in those scenes to kind of like build the context of why we're seeing these scenes.
Right.
Because there are times, and it's not to say that I don't enjoy them, I do, because I love like getting away from the primary block of characters and seeing what's going on with the more secondary and tertiary characters as well. But there are times in this show where some of these scenes are like, okay, I'm not really sure why they're showing me this, but that's cool.
Yeah, and I
Like
mean,
the scene with Hugh, it's not a bad scene by any means, but there's no real there's no like real context behind why it's being shown outside of like, is it just to amplify the struggles of the small folk at every level? Because Hugh's like a tradesman, so he's not, at the bottom of the small folk. And then we're seeing the scene where all of the rat catchers are hung from the castle walls,
hmm,
and like we're seeing the small folk in mourning and other small folk being like, what's this all about? And but it just kind of, they cut these scenes off really quickly and then just move back to a main character. And I wish we could spend just a tiny bit more time in these scenes to give the world a little bit more of a three-dimensional quality.
agreed with that. Agreed with that. And I mean, Hugh and his family, but mostly Hugh. He's one of those characters that I've just been ready to get to since the show began. And when season one ended where it did, I was kind of just thinking, finally, okay, it looks like season two will bring in this aspect of the books, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think I was maybe looking forward to that a little bit too much because the amount of
Okay.
time that we've spent with Hugh so far, I'm like, give me more.
I have a question for you, speaking of like secondary and tertiary
Yeah,
characters. What did you think about the Erryk v. Arryk scenes in this show?
this is going to make me sound really cold hearted, but frankly, I don't think we spent enough time with either of the characters to make me really care.
I actually was more surprised than anything that Arryk actually went through with it. Like, I really thought, I guess because they're twins and how his brother responded originally, that when Criston Cole like rolls up on him in the mess hall and is like being a bully and pushing him around and being like, you're gonna go over there and you're gonna pretend to be your brother and kill this woman. I like the way he was responding, I was like, okay, he's gonna get there and turn cloak, which actually I would have liked a lot more.
Yeah.
But instead he got there, they fought, Erryk killed Arryk, and then Erryk killed himself. And I was like, what was the point of focusing on them as characters?
I mean, all the time we spent with them is pretty much the one episode last season where they're getting ready to crown Aegon, but they can't find him. So they go on this whole search throughout the city looking for him. But we didn't spend
It
nearly enough time with these two people where it's like they're essentially just like NPCs at this moment. Like
Yeah.
they might as well
And
go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, and due to that, like the how you're describing their existence within the show is what makes it seem like their little brother v brother showdown was just used to create one more trauma for Rhaenyra.
Right, right. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. And I think too, like, obviously, after the episode aired, I did kind of like open up the old Twitter machine, see what people are saying. And a lot of people have a vastly different opinion than me that the Arik v. Eric fight was like so emotional and so good and like everything they ever wanted. So fair,
Well, I'm
yeah,
happy for them.
happy for them. It was an all right place to end the episode, I think. I'm ready to get the story rolling.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Like, if we've got to end every episode with a death, then that definitely served its purpose.
Ooh, that would, you know what? That would be an interesting way to go about this season, ending every episode on a death.
That seems to be how we've been ending a lot of episodes lately.
I'm upset that I haven't spent hardly any time with Damon's daughters. Like, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Maybe that's just me and my own personal bias against, not being super invested in Alicent and Rhaenyra.
Yeah, personally for me, Alicent and Rhaenyra is a pretty like easy viewpoint for me. Rhaenyra is the better monarch.
Agreed.
She's proven that over and over again. When you look at like what makes a good monarch to me would be somebody who does actually worry about the impact of their decisions, which she does. And I think that's shown in all of the restraint that she has. Instead of just going to open war right off start, she's like, I don't know if I want to do that kind of thing. And even with how she was appalled by the death of Prince Jaehaerys, like she was like, why would I do that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would I do that to Helena? She's innocent. But you don't see that same type of restraint coming from Alicent's children who could be in line for the throne.
Yeah. And as you're talking about this too, I'm thinking about all of the things that did happen in these first two episodes. And I will say that even with the things that I didn't enjoy or I thought could have been a little bit better, the acting of everyone is incredible. Like,
Oh, the acting is stellar.
there are scenes where I just, like maybe the writing or the story itself, I'm kind of like met on, but these actors are carrying it on their backs. I mean, that whole procession through the streets with Allison and Helena, the actress that plays Helena just, I think she killed it. Like, it was such a great performance. That moment where they're throwing the dried flowers from like that bridge above, and she's just like looking up, and she just looks absolutely terrorized. She's not even saying
Yeah.
any words. And I'm like, for me, like that moment was all of the emotional impact that I guess that was the only emotional impact for me where I was really like feeling in my feels, I guess.
I see what you're saying. But I still think they cut that scene a little
They
short.
could have went on a little bit longer. Yeah.
I remember specifically thinking, like, when I watched it this morning, I was like, why did they cut the scene right there?
I honestly, the cutting back and forth between the interrogation of the gold cloak about the rat catcher and then like cutting to that, like it was too choppy. Like, just let me experience this one thing, please. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
people were upset because they wanted the emotional response. Like, they wanted to feel that. And then they kind of like diced it all up. And they didn't get to it in the first episode. So, like, we have this big event that happens, and then you have to wait 7 days to get the emotional response. So, it kind of doing that with the pacing, I think, makes it hard to kind of get back into the feelings of things.
Yeah. I would agree very much with that. It's when you have these like 7-day breaks, when you come back and the new episode drops, you're like, ooh, it's hard to like immediately pick back up where you were emotionally when you watched the last one.
True.
So like you're going into it restarting all of the way that you're experiencing the episode. And I agree they should have probably put that scene in, they should have combined like all of those together and kept them a little bit more emotionally grouped.
Yeah, they could have. But I mean, this season is only 8 episodes, so I don't know. I don't think the pacing is going to get any better. but
No, I don't expect it to.
I still have a higher hope for this season than last. I'm liking the new characters a lot, and I did enjoy the first episode of this season a lot, more so than anything last season. So I think it'll be fine.
I'm definitely interested to see where it goes, especially because now that we know for sure that they've dropped the name Daeron, that means that we're going to have another dragon rider for the High Towers, correct?
I don't know, like, are they gonna send out someone who's like Lucerys' age to go like into
Well,
war? Because I think the main thing right now is like scooping up all of the royal bastards, anyone who has Targaryen lineage, to be like, all right, we need riders.
yeah, we haven't really seen that start to play out though. Like we haven't seen anybody running around collecting royal bastards yet.
But we have met three of them so far this
Yeah.
season, which is like we're getting there. God,
Yeah, we're
I will
getting
be so
there.
upset if we get to the end of the season and it's like, hear ye. Anyone who thinks they can ride a dragon, and then we have to wait 2 more years. I'll end it.
Oh, that would be
I'll end
terrible.
it there.
That would be terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully we get to spend some time with the other Alicent Hightower child. That would be great, though. Agreed. Hopefully.
Yeah, there's a lot to pack into the next 6
Yeah, and
episodes.
they need something for Otto to do. So,
Yeah, I could see Otto running back there and then starting to groom Daron to be his puppet.
should we end it there?
Sure.
All right. Thanks for listening. We will be back next week. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and thanks again.